now this is the second section of today's The Voice of Dr. Yin. And now I'm so happy to introduce my first guest in my own show, Colonel Lawrence Setting, to you, because this is also the first time I have my own show and I interview the special guest. I'm so exciting and I want to share it with you all. And just before we started, I think some of you may already heard about Colonel Setting's name, but I really want to introduce him again to you because I respect him so much. He is also a great friend for me, and he is a COVID-19 subject matter expert, as well as he is known as a retired U.S. Army Reserve Colonel, and also the veteran of Afghanistan and Iraq. He is a real American hero. And he also had his civilian career in international business and medical research. He got his PhD in biology, neurology, and also he is also of book that Restoring the Republic, arguments for a second American Revolution. And he always show his idea in his talk in Gateway Pundit, and he appears in different interviews very often all over the world. So actually, thank you for joining me, Colonel Setting. I'm so happy.
Thank you, Dr. Yan. It's an honor to be on your program, especially as your first guest.
Thank you. So actually today I want to bring the latest news about you and your research outcome about the origin of COVID-19 to our audience. As we know that very recently you have joined a very high-level conference in Netherlands, and there is your the audio video of your speech in that Netherlands conference posted by the Citizens Commission on National Security. So in this almost half an hour speech, I have listened to it, and I see you have went through a lot of very, very core topics in the origin of COVID and present the audience the inside network between the CCP's communist parties, Chinese communist parties, military, and also the international scientists, how the Chinese Communist Party, the military scientists pretend to be civilian scientists and also infiltrate, finally manipulate the academic field all over the world. So right before we start the question, I actually want to play the end that you gave in the speech in the Netherlands conference to our audience. So let's listen to what Colonel Setting said at the end of that speech in Netherlands to thousands of audience.
So let me end now where I started. It's my scientific opinion that COVID-19 was made in a laboratory as part of China's biowarfare program. And if we do not hold China accountable for the 2019 pandemic, we're likely to face another, possibly more dangerous pandemic and the proliferation of biological weapons from China to the world. So, dank u wel.
Okay, thank you, Colonel Setting. Could you first introduce about this conference and what kind of level of this conference is, why there can be thousands of audience, and also, as I saw from the video, it's so professional. It looks like the TED, that speech, that kind of occasion. And could you briefly introduce this conference first? Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Yan, this was a conference that was held on August 25th, just a few weeks ago, and it was organized by a political party which is called the Forum for Democracy. And the Forum for Democracy is actually in numbers the largest political party in the Netherlands, although they don't yet hold many seats in the parliament, but it's very active. There are a lot of young people involved. And this conference was focused on China, and not it included not just my talk about COVID-19 and the pandemic, but there were many other speakers who were talking about the politics, the geopolitical situation in Asia, about Taiwan, about the aggressiveness of the Chinese Communist Party and what we need to do to combat that aggressiveness. One of this, in fact, the key speaker there was Peter Hoekstra, who used to be the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, and there were other speakers as well as myself focusing on various aspects of China and how we confront China aggressiveness, not just in Asia, but globally.
Thank you, sir. I just feel so interested into the topic. So it's not only about COVID, actually, it's about communist China. So do you think such high-level conference focus on the confronting against the communist China happened in Europe was common before the COVID pandemic, or it changed actually after the pandemic? I mean, the people changed their attitude, realized something. That's why they would hold such high-level conference to just focus on the communist China's topic.
Well, absolutely. I think COVID-19 pandemic had a lot to do with waking people up about what the Chinese Communist Party is doing. Certainly the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, not just on creating illness and death, but the disruption of societies, economically and socially, had a huge impact. And I think it really stimulated people and, in fact, countries to focus more on what the Chinese Communist Party is doing and what we need to combat the negative effects of their activities, both in terms of public health, but also in economic and military aspects.
So, sir, I remember you talk about the People's Liberation Army's network in this video, and also you have actually shown a lot of the People's Liberation Army's bioweapon scientists profile in this video and connected them to compromised scientists in not only US, but also Netherlands. So could you help our audience to know how did you find these connections hidden behind the pandemic? How did you identify these People's Liberation Army scientists? 2 years ago, when I tried to tell people in the media that this is not only about one lab in Wuhan, but this is about more labs, and the biggest boss behind is People's Liberation Army and the CCP. And people thought, conspiracy. How could Dr. Yan connect just the pandemic to some military, to some party? This is so political, sounds so far-fetched. So could you let the audience know, how did you went through your independent research and reach to the core secret that People's Liberation Army bioweapon scientists are the ones behind all of that?
Well, it's not a conspiracy at all. And I found out about this in two ways. First, I mainly started reading a lot of the scientific articles about COVID-19 virus, and a lot of the articles that were being published by Chinese scientists, and really identifying who those people are and where they're working, whether they're in a university or they're working for the People's Liberation Army. So it was mostly a matter of connecting dots and see who was paying for these different studies. Also, I had a number of Chinese friends who sent me information about, the people who were doing this research, and not just on coronaviruses, but other potentially dangerous viruses. And eventually I structured what the Chinese Communist Party, or in particular the People's Liberation Army, their structure in terms of their biowarfare program. And what I discussed in the Netherlands is that, I see it at three levels. I mean, the first level is the People's Liberation Army research centers and their hospitals. And this is the military secret level. Now, layered on top of that are China's universities, their so-called civilian research centers like the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and also some of their biotechnology companies. Now, people need to understand, and I don't think they understand well in the United States, is that in China today, there really is no difference between civilian and military research. And, I'm not saying this. This is actually something that the Chinese Communist Party in 2016, in their 13th five-year plan, had decided that, in fact, they mandated the fusion of civilian and military research. So there really is no difference. But it's the second level of Chinese universities, of so-called civilian research centers and biotechnology companies that has allowed the People's Liberation Army to access the third level, which is the international laboratories, and access skills and knowledge and technologies from outside of China and bring it back into China. And what had happened since approximately the 1990s, it started, you had this wave after wave of scientists coming from China, many of whom are from the People's Liberation Army, coming to the United States. Now, I would say most of these scientists, they stay in the United States for a few years, and then they bring back to China these skills, knowledge, and technologies. But there are some of these scientists from China staying in the United States. And this is, it is also includes scientists from the People's Liberation Army, and they become permanent residents or even U.S. citizens, and they act as anchors to allow other Chinese scientists to come into their laboratory. Now, what has happened is there's a critical mass of these Chinese scientists who are loyal to the Chinese Communist Party rather than being loyal to the United States as permanent residents and U.S. citizens. So they have maintained this collaborative relationship with scientists in China, but also many of the Chinese scientists who are presently in the United States have maintained a long-term research collaboration with the People's Liberation Army. So in a sense, the United States virus laboratories have merely become an extension of the Chinese Communist Party research and development program, including the People's Liberation Army. So, in a sense, we're, contributing to the effort of biowarfare in China by maintaining this relations without any restrictions or oversight. So it also happens in the Netherlands, and I pointed out a number of researchers, Dutch researchers, who are continuing this relationship with Chinese scientists and even the People's Liberation Army.
Yes, sir. Actually, this kind of infiltration, and it takes so long time, over decades, and also it's so massive, from the one of the simple laboratory lab to even the national labs in America and other, and also like the WHO reference labs, like the NIH, the headquarter office, their campus. So actually, this is I would like to describe this style of infiltration is like parasites. So once I explain it to some IC staff in America, they cannot really understand this pattern. So I said, just image is like parasite in your body, and they grab your nutrition. Also, they make damage to you. And in this case, those CCP scientists or the people they manipulate from China to America actually running like the parasite in Americans' academic and other systems. So they grab your technology, they try to steal the secret things, and also they even get your taxpayers' money back to China. I mean, although in China, actually the government put huge amount of the money to support their unrestricted bioweapon programs, but they still want to get some money from America, millions, several millions like that. So this parasite style actually make Americans get confused how to separate them from the real patriots or how to clear it. And also in this case, because this is so massive, it's kind of lack of manpower in America to even handle such cases, especially when behind such cases there are the regime like CCP, the second powerful regime in the world, to support them. So, sir, could you let our audience know more that when you study such the network about CCP and their agents through the COVID origin investigation, what's your idea to handle or prevent such problems? I mean, so many people, they need this kind of tips for them to study, to understand how to handle it, because they really worry, as you said, the future pandemic or other such bio attacks may follow up. Of course, I think based on my intelligence, there will be if there is right timing. So what's your opinions in handling these things, or little by little handle this?
Well, first of all, Dr. Yan, I want to say that parasite is an excellent analogy for the situation that we're talking about. In fact, I'm going to steal that from you and use that in the future, because it is a very clear and excellent analogy of what is happening. Now, I think the first thing to do is what we've been doing, is exposing these people, is letting, the taxpayers and the American citizens understand what's going on. That is exactly as you're saying, that there's these scientists are still loyal to the Chinese Communist Party and are helping the Chinese Communist Party research and development program, including the biowarfare program. And actually hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars are flowing from the United States into the Chinese Communist Party R&D program. Not just cash, which actually cash is being transferred, but also, millions of dollars in terms of knowledge, skills, and technologies are essentially being stolen. So what I've been doing, and of course what you've been doing as well, and a lot of people who work with us on this have been exposing this type of activity. But it's not just this activity, it's also promoting Chinese Communist Party propaganda in the United States. Now, you probably know this story, but I'll tell it to your audience. Very early in the pandemic, when we really didn't know for sure whether the COVID-19 virus came from nature or was created in the laboratory, although many of us had suspicions even early on that it was created in a laboratory. And of course, you broke the story to the world yourself on this topic. But early February, there was a Chinese scientist who's in the United States named Shan Lu, who's at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, but is also the editor of the Emerging Microbes and Infections journal, which is a Chinese journal. He actually solicited an article to be published saying that there's no evidence that COVID-19 virus came from a laboratory, that it came from nature. And it's interesting because I have the emails that this article was not only asked to be written, and it was written by at least two Chinese scientists working in the United States at the University of North Carolina and Ohio State, but it was submitted, and within 4 hours it was accepted for publication. Now, I don't know any case ever in the history of science that an article was accepted within 4 hours. And it's actually, I have the emails which shows that it was accepted in 4 hours. So what I'm saying here is that it's not just, the transfer of cash and knowledge, skills, and technologies, but also some of these scientists are actually promoting Chinese Communist Party propaganda in the United States through scientific journals.
Yes, sir. So you remember this paper published within several hours from Liu Shanlu in Ohio University? Do you remember the other two American scientists' name on the paper? Linda Saff and also Susan Weiss, right?
That's exactly right. Linda Saff is also at Ohio State, and Susan Weiss is at the University of Pennsylvania, which is also well known for its collaboration with Chinese Communist Party scientists.
Our research actually shows that Susan Weiss is called by American some media or established media as the mother of coronavirus, because she actually has done quite a lot in this field, and she is a very reputational scientist in American Academy of Science for microbiology. So in this case, you see CCP, when they try to enhance their propaganda, when they try to spread misinformation, and they can even reach to such high level of the scientists and use them and also convince them to help CCP to spread such misinformation, while American and even American government were misled by these scientists, because even the president, no matter Trump or Biden, they are not scientists. They have to listen to such scientists' opinion. And so you see, this actually, just from one paper, you can see the deep connections between CCP and the compromised American scientists in the pandemic origin, and also in the whole, the misinformation campaign, right?
Well, no, absolutely. I frequently say that since COVID-19 and the pandemic, that the medical and scientific literature has become politically contaminated, and that you have to be very, very careful what you read. And what the Chinese Communist Party does, and it's not just with scientists, with politicians and businessmen, they have a program which they call, or at least been translated into English, as an elite capture. They capture these high level people by, offering them some kind of rewards, whether it's, money or prestige or invitations to China and, honors from China. So it's easy to get people who are susceptible to this type of bribery to go along and work with the Chinese Communist Party, even at the detriment of the United States, in order to increase their own, position, whether it's in science or politics or business. So this is an active program that is going on at every level in the United States, essentially pushed and supervised by the Chinese Communist Party.
Yes, they have this one called Capture the Elite. But, sir, you definitely so familiar with another term actually from Soviet Union, but it's widely used by this communist regime that's called useful idiot, right? So,
yeah, exactly. Well, I was being a little more diplomatic and using the term I think the Chinese Communist Party uses, but you're exactly right. These people are useful idiots, and I think they will be discarded later once the Chinese Communist Party achieves its aims.
Already, you see, when Americans start to realize, so Dr. Fauci is not our great scientist, and also Peter Daszak is not a real patriot, and he actually is not. He's from UK, maybe not America. Anyway, he's not a person people should trust. And also, like Ralph Baric, actually, his technology was used in the COVID, and he still tried to help help communist China to cover up the origin of COVID. And so actually these people, because of a lot of evidence now, they get revealed more and more. So now I can tell you CCP already kind of abandoned them. And so now CCP's propaganda and also Russia, because Putin and Xi Jinping become the secret allies now against America, they actually changed the propaganda to target America for the origin of COVID, because they now know Americans realize the compromised American scientists. And also they just try to stop Americans further understand the real secret behind the pandemic. They want you end at this level and just blame American scientists, even American government. And finally, what CCP and Putin want is Americans fight against Americans and finally undermine America, divide America. So, sir, what do you think about this? And I believe you have already seen this problem, right?
Well, yes, indeed. I think Peter Daszak is a perfect example of what you described. His entire career, his entire achievements have really been based on his relationship with Chinese Communist Party scientists like Zheng Lixi at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So, his entire career, his entire, quote, success in science is not due to any brilliance on his part, but simply by this relationship that he established with China, and the Chinese Communist Party has taken advantage of that and used him as a tool to influence American science and also U.S. Government officials.
Yes, sir. So we have another 1 minute left now in this episode. So in this episode, what do you want our audience to remember? I mean, of course, I will invite you back to my broadcast later on. We always have a lot to talk. And so in this episode, could you let the audience know your final opinions?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to repeat the title of my talk in the Netherlands. And I want people to know that the COVID-19 virus was made in a laboratory. It's unequivocal in terms of the scientific evidence, and it was made as part of China's biowarfare program. And I also will continue, and I want Americans to know that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated U.S. virus research laboratories and other laboratories, in fact, not just in universities, but even within the U.S. Department of Defense. And people have to become aware of that because it's a danger to national security, but it's also simply a waste of U.S. taxpayer money, and the U.S. taxpayers are thinking it's being used for the benefit of the United States, but it's simply flowing into China's Communist Party's R&D program, including the People's Liberation Army.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you can come back and we can keep our talking to our audience. Thank you so much, and enjoy your nice summer week.
Thank you, Dr. Yan.
Okay.